Well, thank you everyone for dialing in. I got a great guest today, someone I've been looking forward to talking to for quite some time. Eric V. Stacks. He is someone, if you are in Bitcoin, you definitely know him. You'll see his face at many of the conferences, the meetups. I think you were recently in El Salvador. You got to, I mean, just your experience as a business owner, entrepreneur. Really excited what you have to say today. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I'm pumped to be here.
Awesome.
I appreciate you and what you're doing and look forward to the conversation.
All right. Thanks, Eric. Well, Eric, can you just, for those who don't know you, because ideally we're reaching some non-coiners or Bitcoin curious folks out there. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, well, to all the pre-coiners, I would call them, because everyone's going to be a Bitcoiner at some point.
There you go.
Yeah, so I'm a career cannabis farmer. I live in Humboldt County in Northern California. I'll give you the most comprehensive, but distilled down to the important pieces here of my story. I grew up in Southern California. My parents divorced when I was like 5 years old. My mother remarried a psychiatrist. She, as a result of that marriage, got involved in pharmaceutical use, antidepressants, anti-anxiety medication. Upstanding family. She ended up getting a doctorate degree during the years of being married to the psychiatrist. The long and short of it is, though, the medication that she was taking or the pharmaceuticals that she was taking, they didn't solve any of her underlying depression issues. And she ended up committing suicide when I was 20 years old. And yeah, by the time I was 15, I got introduced to cannabis, and I developed an affinity for cannabis pretty quickly, and an extreme aversion to pharmaceuticals, because I was watching several of my family members use pharmaceuticals, and as far as I could tell, even at a young age, it kind of zombied them out. It definitely wasn't solving any of their issues, and it was putting them in this like sedated, trance-like state where they're kind of numb to things that they really should be upset about. Some injustices taking place in the world. A whole slew of things happened as far as like, my parents' divorce. I went to a court appointed mediator when I was like 10 years old. My younger brother and I, we had our own attorney. My mom had an attorney. My stepfather had an attorney. And we would go and we would speak with these like credible, important figures in our society that would sit down with us, my brother and I, and they would tell us things like, okay, so this is a safe place. You could tell us whatever's happening between your mom and your dad and how you feel about it. And we're not going to tell any of this stuff to your parents. Yeah. And so we would sit there and we would unload like, oh, my mom does this. It's just being mean to my dad. And, my mom, she's married to this rich man, and, she's raking my dad through court, and he's paying too much child support and blah, blah, blah. We would like unload what we thought was taking place. And immediately, so we would get out of these meetings. My mom would go in for 15, 20 minutes. We'd jump in the car, and on our way out, my mom would be like, so you said this and you said that, and why do you feel this way? And then she would kind of like emotionally punish my brother and I for like unloading our honest thoughts about what was taking place. So anyways, I developed a serious, deep mistrust for the system at large, right? Strong affinity for cannabis. My attitude about cannabis was at a very early age is like, especially after smoking some weed with my buddies, I'm like, wait, this isn't some gnarly, dirty drug. Like, why is it that people can pop all these crazy pills? They can go and buy alcohol and tobacco, and they can do all this stuff that's clearly bad for them, but they can't smoke this plant, right? And so that became something that I started to become pretty passionate about. And then when my mother died, that kind of fueled me in this like vengeance that I had against, at the time, what I considered to be just the pharmaceutical industry. But now looking back, it's just broken incentives that are really predicated upon our inflationary monetary system. Our Keynesian economic model really distorts how people behave due to the debasement of the currency, which is a whole rabbit hole in itself. But anyway, so when I was like 25 years old, I had been selling cars for a few years, working for a Toyota store, which was actually a pretty fun job. I learned a lot about people and sales and whatever. And a friend of mine that I went to high school with left Southern California, where we grew up, moved to Humboldt County, went to Humboldt State University, and met a bunch of people who grew cannabis. They contacted me and said, hey, if you want to come up and work an outdoor harvest on one of these medical cannabis farms, you can come up and trim. There's opportunity for you. So I immediately dropped everything. I sold a bunch of stuff, put everything else that I had in storage, left with a duffel bag and a backpack, and came to Northern California. And I've been here ever since. So I got here in 2009. And I worked for an individual out in the middle of nowhere, which was a very transformative period of my life. For 2 years, I was in this cabin in the hills of Humboldt County with no cell phone service, no internet, growing weed for this guy, and saved up a bunch of money, enough to like set up my own grow in a garage. I started a 501c3 nonprofit so that I could be compliant under the 215 medical marijuana laws at the time. And started growing cannabis in a garage and selling it to dispensaries in Southern California. And that led to 2015. I had a 50-50 deal to grow cannabis out on a large parcel in Southern Humboldt with an older couple that had owned this land for a long time. So I set up this large 20,000 square foot cultivation site. And right when I got finished setting this facility up, the governor of the state of California, Jerry Brown, signed into effect MRSA, which was the Medical Marijuana Safety Regulations Act, which put into effect the basic regulatory framework for licensure. And so that was done preemptively, knowing that there was a high probability that the people of the state of California voted for recreational adult use. And so I was, you could say, in the right place at the right time. And for me, this was kind of like a dream come true era for me in my life. So I registered the farm, negotiated with the property owner. We couldn't come to terms. So what I did was kind of a Hail Mary. I scrapped together every fucking dollar that I possibly could and bought 2 parcels. I bought 10 acres with a house and 7 acres raw land. And I had an attorney, I had 2 attorneys, engineer, biologist. I had everything that I needed to like get right to work on putting together my application with the county to get permitted to then get ultimately licensed by the state of California, which I successfully did in record times. I'm a very intense personality, you could say. If I'm going to do something, I'm all in on it. I'm not good at doing a lot of things. I'm a laser-eyed Bitcoin maxi before Bitcoin hit, you could say, right? I'm very laser focused on what I was doing. And so, yeah, I closed escrow on this property and I submitted my application with the county. In closing escrow on this property was the first real estate that I had purchased. I had banking issues, banking impedance. It was difficult for me to get any large sums or notable sums of money into the bank. So, all of the surplus that I had earned was going back into my business. It was kind of like, every year I would make some money. I would just keep reinvesting it in the business. And so closing escrow on the property was a big thing for me. And I had literally all of my money in this property. And so I started to go down the economic rabbit hole and wanted to understand the boom bust cycles, because I was selling cars during the 2008 financial crisis. And I definitely saw the change economically, but I didn't have an incentive or the wherewithal to really dig deep and understand what was happening. I was in my early 20s. I was kind of a lost, confused young man trying to find my place in the world. For sure. And so, yeah, I was a little bit more focused on the immediate in my life as opposed to the macro. And so anyways, I went down the economic rabbit hole in 2016 when I'm standing on this 17 acres of land that I just purchased with all of my money. That led me to understanding, the Keynesian economic model, the Federal Reserve, how we once had a gold-backed currency, and how, we detached from gold in 1971. That led me to the hard money Austrian economic theory. Kind of became a gold bug for a few months there. I was like, okay, well, I can't just arbitrarily print more of this. And then I discovered Bitcoin, and it fucking blew my mind. Because then I was so well primed to understand the magnitude of a perfectly engineered monetary instrument that has finality of supply. And as a commodity producer, cannabis is a commodity. I'm watching supply satiate demand. So the value of the product is decreasing quite rapidly. And I'm looking at this monetary instrument with like a pretty intense 9 months of studying monetary history and markets in the United States. And I realized that whatever the money is going to have infinite demand on it, because money is essentially a call option on any other good or service that the marketplace can produce. It's the only thing that has infinite demand because you can convert it into anything else, right? And if you could pair infinite demand with true scarcity, you have the apex monetary instrument. And this thing is going to appreciate at a faster rate than everything else forever, as long as it exists. So the discovery of Bitcoin caused me to pivot my life strategy. And I realized that, you know, I had a whole litany of issues, threats of lawsuits from neighboring parcels and cities. There was a lot of uproar around the cannabis farm that I was in the process of getting permitted, which I did. I got it permitted in record times. I was one of the first permit holders in the county. And as a result of that, one of the first license holders in the state of California. And so I'm standing on this property in the beginning of 2018 with a license in my hand. And I'm looking back, you know, a month prior to that, I had discovered Bitcoin, and I realized, like, dude, I'm fucked. This is a problem. Like, my dream come true is an absolute nightmare. This is like a very vindicating moment for me in my life. But I'm realizing that what's going to happen is these margins are going to decrease, you know, as Jeff Booth says, and I can articulate what I was experiencing a lot better now due to the work of Jeff Booth and like the Sailor series and just looking at the world through the lens of Bitcoin. I realized that the supply was going to satiate the demand. And if I scaled up, I was going to be further exacerbating the problem. And so while I had the opportunity to make a surplus, I needed to make sure that surplus went into a asset that was going to appreciate at a fast enough rate. And interestingly enough, I'm very risk adverse. You know,
really?
For somebody who, I have a 100% allocation to Bitcoin. I live in a rental. I have 2 nice cars, and all my money's in Bitcoin. And I was one of the first license holders for, you know, a cannabis farm in the state of California. And so that risk aversion, I realized that I had a existential crisis, and that the business model was not going to be sustainable for the long term. And without the ability to sell public equity and then leverage the equity accrued or the valuation of my business and the value of the infrastructure by borrowing from these mega financial institutions, that at best I was going to be able to get, you know, into a consolidation and a wrap up of some sort. And I could sell this farm to a larger outfit. And so anyways, I sold the farm. I owned the place for 2 years. It was 1 year of licensing and permitting, biological studies. I mean, it was a whole litany of hoops to jump through. I can say that I'm in the most regulated industry in the state with the most regulations. So it was definitely a crash course in, like, you know, how the public participates in developing regulations and, you know, the public hearings, the board of supervisors, you know, how all this works. And so anyways, the long and short of it is I sold the property at the end of 2018. And I'm really, really grateful that I did. I took a chunk of that, put it into Bitcoin, bought some gold and silver, and then I pivoted my strategy to farm consulting and management services, because there were a lot of farmers in Humboldt County who are dealing with the regulatory impedance in addition to the loss of income. And so I'm pretty efficient. I've been doing this for a long time, very intensely. And so, I spent the last handful of years since then, last 6 years, doing consulting work. And then lastly, what I'll add to this is when the Sailor series hit, that's when my mind fucking exploded for the second time. And I was like, this thing is not going away. This is for real. And I basically panic sold, sweating bullets, dude. Like everything else that I had that had any economic energy stored up in it, any other monetary instrument that I had, anything of value that I didn't need beyond its utility value, plowed all into Bitcoin. And I'm really grateful that I did.
That's awesome. So that's like I guess a popular meme, right? Where it's just like a TV and a mattress, and it's like multi-million-dollar in Bitcoin.
Yeah. With a screen with Sailor on it. Watch the Sailor on repeat, dude.
It's going up forever, Laura. Yeah, no, it's it's an amazing story. And you know, when I look at that, and especially here in California, right? So the cost of living in general in California is tremendous. I mean,
Yep.
from what my mother-in-law and their family are going through, from the cost of electricity, gas, I mean, you name it, right? It's
Yeah.
outrageous. Now throw in those other regulations like you're talking about. I mean, how you can, as the price of your commodity or the value, I guess, goes down as everything else is going up, and it's not
Yeah.
maintaining the same pace. Like by
Yep.
you having that Bitcoin reserve, right? That has basically kept you afloat, if I'm not mistaken, right? Is that
Totally.
how you
Yeah.
viewed it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I look at it like, so the process of commoditization is as something becomes commoditized, you're going to produce that commodity down to the marginal cost of production. And
Mhm.
if you can be subsidized through the fiat paradigm, by selling equity on Wall Street or taking on debt, then you actually have the financial horsepower to produce a commodity below its variable cost of production. And if you're large enough, you can do that for quite some time, and you can consolidate an industry. And so, Jeff Booth's work has been very pivotal in my understanding and the forces that we contend with in this world. And he essentially says that free markets are deflationary, because where you
Mhm.
have a free market, you're going to have wherever there's a large margin is an indicator that there's not enough supply relative to the demand, right? So the free market will bid the price up for something. And in my case, a great example is cannabis. Because
Mhm.
of prohibition, there has been a lot more demand than there has been supply. And as a result, people are willing to pay more to bid for that portion of this small supply relative to the demand. Well, that large margin is a enormous economic incentive for entrepreneurs and capital to flow into that sector of the marketplace, increase the supply, satiate the demand with supply, which will then bring the margin down. And so I see that happen everywhere within the marketplace. And there's two ways to deal with that. The first one I would consider to be scumbaggery, and that would be to build some sort of a regulatory moat around your
Yeah.
sector in the marketplace. And a classic example is that I use often is insulin. It's my understanding, I could be wrong about this, but you'll get the point. But it's my
Mhm.
understanding that two companies have access to the patent or have the rights to produce insulin because it's a patented product. So there's a regulatory moat preventing other entrepreneurs from producing insulin and selling it into the free market. So as a result of that regulatory moat, that monopolization, they're able to maintain this enormous margin perpetually. But in a free market dynamic, you would have a bunch of entrepreneurs would basically just go and get a bunch of labs. They'd
Right.
build new labs, they'd rent existing labs, and they would dump a bunch of insulin on the market. And that insulin would then drop in cost all the way down to the marginal cost of production. They would
Right.
scale up as the margins kept decreasing, which is further exacerbate the problem. And so what that means is that while you have the opportunity economically to harvest a large margin anywhere in the marketplace, you have to take that margin and you need to put it somewhere where it's going to appreciate at a fast enough rate. And Bitcoin has been appreciating at a faster rate than anything else for the last 15 years. And I'm a firm believer that it's going to maintain that position forever as long as it stays decentralized and secure. And so that is that's just a wonderful way to look at things, and that understanding has allowed me to see the world much more clearly. And so when you pair that free market deflationary force with an inflationary monetary system where the monetary units are being lent into existence as debt against assets, they're incompatible forces, they're opposing forces. Our money system requires that everything goes up in value in the marketplace, or at the very least, the assets collateralizing the debt have to go up in value. Otherwise, the system will go insolvent. So as they're lending monetary units into the marketplace, they're lending dollars into existence as debt against, predominantly real estate and equities,
Mhm.
which means that if the value of the real estate and equities in nominal dollar terms goes below whatever the amount in nominal dollar terms is owed, then you're upside down and the system goes insolvent, everything goes bust.
Right.
So as we become more technologically advanced, and we clearly are, we're essentially producing more for less. We're becoming more energy efficient. That's deflation. We produce houses much faster. Like, why is it a house 50 years ago that took like 6 months to build could be built in 3 weeks or faster with a big enough crew, with nail guns that have 22 caliber bullets and laser levels and all this like high-tech gear? Why is that house more expensive? It's actually being produced for much less energy. And so that's a result of the expansion of the money supply. And the more productive we get, the more technologically advanced we become, the more downward price pressure we're putting on everything, all while and that's all happening within a economic system that requires prices to go up on everything. So everybody's getting squeezed. It's creating an existential economic crisis for everybody participating in the marketplace. And that's a problem. And so, yeah, anyways, it's a problem.
No, I'm with you. No, I'm very interested. So as I mentioned before our call here, I got a friend of mine who's looking in Kentucky to kind of do the same thing as you did when you first started out with. And when I heard on one of your previous podcasts, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did you see that the potential for Bitcoin mining with energy production within the greenhouses or whatever, the heat generation? Was there this talk of like using that as a way to generate Bitcoin for your treasury by using that in the heating process?
Yeah, that's been a concept that I've been privy to for quite some time. And if you're in a very cold climate, you could definitely do that where you need heat. Most of the cannabis facilities in the States, maybe some of them in the northern regions during the winter time are going to require heat. That's definitely a good thing to do if you have the electricity. One of the problems, though, is that when you're going through the regulatory process and you're dealing with municipalities, the planning departments, they don't want to give you everything that you ask for. It's kind of like there's this residual like perspective of like, this is some like gnarly radioactive despicable thing, and you're privileged just to be producing it, and you're like, hey, yo, but I need 1200 amps of power, otherwise I can't effectively run my facility. And it's like this negotiation. Well, okay, well, we'll approve you for 600 amps of power. So I think one of the problems is that the Bitcoin mining requires electricity, and in most of the facilities running heat are going to be running heat that's going to be gas. So in our case, we run heat during the winter, during the dark period for a couple hours of a night, and we use propane. I would love if we had a large enough power drop to be mining Bitcoin. So there's not as much of that as you would think. I think that the economic incentives are so strong that in the future you will start to see more people do that, because you're paying to use energy. If you're going to pay to use the energy, and you could, use the heat that's a byproduct of the mining, and you can essentially print yourself Bitcoin or mint new Bitcoin as a result, support the network as a result, then that's obviously a no-brainer. It's kind of like flaring gas. If you can. If you're drilling and you're just flaring gas, like, what are you doing? You could park a generator over that thing and mine Bitcoin. And so I think that we're going to see a lot of that. But the big one, and maybe you were going to get into this, but the big one is Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. I think every individual, every small business, large business, corporation, nation state, central bank, bloodlines, I don't give a fuck who you are. You need Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset, because the appreciation on your balance sheet will hedge you against the the ever-growing difficulties around maintaining that whatever margin you're accustomed to by providing whatever good or service to the marketplace that you do. And so Bitcoin will definitely start to become more of a treasury reserve asset. It'll be on the balance sheet of more and more entities as time goes on. People, the Michael Saylors of the world are doing such a fantastic job spearheading this and the importance of it. And for a multitude of reasons, in cannabis, especially, the value of the product depicts the value of the real estate, the value of the business. There is almost no value in a cannabis corporation. It's all basically the value of the real estate, which is linked to the value of the product, So it's really difficult to get investors to invest in your cannabis farms, for obvious and I would say good reasons. But if you can put together a business of some sort, and your business strategy is I'm going to take this capital and I'm going to put half of it into business infrastructure of whatever sorts, and I'm going to put half of it into Bitcoin, then you're really hedging yourself and your shareholders against any sort of unforeseen market issues. Oh yeah, the marketplace changed, pound price went down. Oh, there's more contractors building here, or whatever it is. More people are doing it. It's not as good. Oh, it took too long, whatever. Sorry, we lost all your money.
Yeah.
Well, over a 4 or 8 year period of trying to develop a business, like, oh, we brought in all this capital. The business took a shit, didn't work, but the Bitcoin shred everybody's whole. And so, yeah, and if you're dealing with descending margins, then you need to have a balance sheet. Like if your P&L is progressively, is struggling every year, it's getting harder to maintain your margins on your P&L, then your balance sheet has to be strong. Otherwise, you're going to have, you're going to go out of business. It's like Michael Saylor famously said when, he's got $500 million on the balance sheet. Here's a fiscally conservative man who didn't want to do fancy, crazy shit. He just wanted to run his company, and he wanted to have some extra capital for future endeavors or future uncertainty. COVID hits, and then they double the money supply, and he realizes he's fucked. He's like, he had a slow death or a fast death. No matter what he did with that treasury, it was going to bleed out. And the best solution by orders of magnitude was to put it into Bitcoin. And then with his story, he buys Bitcoin. The value of his company goes up because the Bitcoin goes up. He sells more shares. He goes and buys more Bitcoin. He borrows some more money. He goes and buys more Bitcoin. He's diluting his shareholders, but increasing the amount of Bitcoin backed, but Bitcoin per share at the same time. Like he hacked the matrix, that guy, dude.
Yeah, like if you were at the conference as well. So I'm sure you heard it. I don't know if you were at the presentation, but
yeah,
when he was given his presentation and he explained how he went from like $1 billion company to 30x to a $30 billion company simply by buying and holding Bitcoin. And then, you could listen to whether it was Dylan LeClaire or others talk about that strategy. And I think a great point of all this is like, hey, look, if you are, pre-coiner, as you mentioned, and you're not sure, right, if you want to do this, no one's saying like your initial jump into that waters has to be your entire, treasury, right? You can ease your way in 1 or 2%, whatever you are, risk, where your comfort level with risk is. But I would also ask, and you've probably heard this before, in 5 or 10 years from now, what do you think will the dollar be worth more or less than it is now? And do you think Bitcoin will be worth more or less than it is now? And when you look at it with that, that time preference perspective, to me, it's an easy answer, right? I mean, without a doubt, Bitcoin is going to be significantly more valuable in 5-10 years than the dollar will be in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, totally. I think the big challenge though is, and I know this is a little conspiracy in some sense, excuse me, but I think we're in the midst of a big psyop. Like, I believe that Gary Gensler and the SEC and the government, and I don't know, you could just call them the overlords, if you will. I think they all understand the magnitude of what's taking place. And the only way to suppress the Bitcoin price is to prevent people from buying it or allow the plebs to get wrecked buying dog coins. And so I think that if we weren't in this interesting period of time where we're coming out of a very dishonest world. And if that wasn't the case, I think Gary Gensler would have said a long time ago, hey, these are all unregistered securities. And I don't think we're going to change the laws to let them into the traditional financial world. We're going to shut them down. Bitcoin, however, is not a security, and we can't do anything about it. And as a matter of fact, we're going to be approving some ETFs, and it's going to become part of the financial institutions. It's going to hit the balance sheets of, nation states are starting to buy it. Then everybody would sell all their garbage and they'd move into Bitcoin. So I feel like there's like an orchestrated effort to like muddle the message. When I heard Jamie Dimon on CNBC hey, I think Satoshi could come back in 2140 and double the supply. I'm thinking this scumbag is flat out lying. This guy's the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, who's apparently is famous for waking up every morning and reading for like an hour or two. I assure you he understands. So, and another element with that one is like, and I can speak to my own experience when I first discovered Bitcoin. The first thought that I had is this is going to destroy all other monetary instruments, or the government's going to destroy it. And in hindsight, I'd have more Bitcoin if I spent the time then to really dig deep on, how the network actually works. It's indestructible. And I don't think people understand that, because there's no Bitcoin marketing department. It's like Vitalik has got, his whole marketing team. It's essentially a CEO of a corporation or a business that's, it's a security.
So dump on you at any time.
Department. Yeah, exactly. So you got to really do the work. You got to dig deep. And it almost seems like in some sense it's too good to be true. And for all of known history, things that were seemingly too good to be true were, and the people that believed that on average got led to the slaughter, or they got wrecked in some way. So I think it's hardwired into our genetic code to be extremely suspicious. And also, though, if you're living in the Western world and you got a job and you got a 401k and you live in a, $400,000 house in the suburbs somewhere, and you're driving a new car, like, you don't have a real existential crisis, at least one that you're aware of. Right. And so I think that, and like, this is still more conspiracy, but I think that there are forces taking play in our world that want to keep people distracted, dumbed down. We're being lied to and confused by the system at large. We're being fed poisonous food. We're getting, we have problems that are a result of the poisonous food and the information that we, ingest. And then we're giving all these crazy synthetic pharmaceuticals as a result. And so people, I think, are in a mass state of hypnosis. And I mean, I can speak to that personally, where I talk to people and I will say things that hit pretty hard, and I just get that blank stare, and I'm just like, did you not hear what I just fucking said? And so, but over time, I think, though, the need for self-preservation, the thing that I can always trust in any individual at any time is their innate need and desire to serve their self-interest. If you're in an airplane and you're going down, you need to put your oxygen mask on first. And so I think as inflation continues to do its thing, the system is designed to inflate. Prices are going to go up on everything. People are going to realize that, their income is not going up as fast as their cost of living is. And so that is wage deflation. If your cost of living goes up 10% and you get a 5% raise, you actually took a 5% haircut. And so as that continues to take place, and it will, the system has to do so, that incentive for people to figure out how to deal with that will increase. And as they, listen to podcasts like this and hear stories from other people who have, and it doesn't even need to be Bitcoin necessarily, as long as they're buying a property of some sort that's not being debased as fast as dollar is, then they're going to get wealthier in dollar terms, but it doesn't actually mean they're getting wealthier. So I think that it's going to just continue to, the economic forces will continue to corral people in the right direction. Not to mention, we got Trump and other president, Bukele has got his Treasury reserve strategy. It's legal tender in El Salvador. Bhutan has been mining Bitcoin quietly.
That's what I said.
Got this nice stockpile.
I was like, I still got to get to El Salvador. I still got to get to El Salvador, and now I got to put Bhutan on my travel list to find out what's going on.
Totally,
It's crazy. It's insane. But yeah, no, I agree with you. I will be at first to admit that I probably saw the world with rose-colored glasses on for a long time. Kind of just believed, like, why would anyone lie to us about what's going on? Like, of course this makes sense, and unfortunately, fortunately, through Bitcoin really opened my eyes. I think COVID and other things really opened up even further, right? Bitcoin standard, fiat standard. I could go check your financial privilege.
Totally.
Broken money, Jeff Booth's book, Price of Tomorrow, right? Like, I could go on. Like, once you go down that rabbit hole, it's funny. Like, I had never really had much of an interest in economics growing up, and then now it's like all
Yeah,
I can consume. And it's funny, you
totally.
maybe some people probably join Bitcoin for the the number go up. Uh,
Yeah,
and while I can admit that initially I got into it because, oh, look at this thing, it's funny how it changes your whole perspective on life, whether it's time
yeah,
preference, family, everything. When I look at adopting Bitcoin, and I'm sure you're similar in the same way, because I see you and your family on X and everything else, traveling together, doing all this fun stuff, and the importance of your family and a future for them is kind of what
totally.
you're. That is like when they say, hey, when it was up to like 70 something $1,000, like, oh, are you selling now? I was like, no, like I'm never selling. I plan on this going over to my kids and for
Yeah,
them, like, but it is
totally.
funny how your whole mindset changes once you start and you see things a lot different. Like take the glasses off and you're like, oh shit, like
Yeah,
this world isn't what I
totally.
thought it was. Um, yeah, it's a
Yes.
very interesting point you bring up, and and that's, I think, part of like what we're trying to do with our business is, when we talk to business owners, really focus on small and medium enterprises, because if you're a large corporation, you have a guy, or you probably have a direct line to Sailor's guy, or something along the lines. But a small business owner, medium size, you're just another name at a bank who owns
Yep.
property or something. So what we're trying to be is like a trusted entity, right? Because if you look at, hey, I'm hearing about Bitcoin, I'm a pre-coiner or Bitcoin curious, and let me Google crypto, because you think they're one and the same. And next thing you know, you're getting some dog coin consultant talking, forget Bitcoin, put all your money in XRP, it's the next wave of the future, or something like that.
Yeah.
We're trying to be that trusted entity where you come to us and then we put you with, whether it's SAS mining for mining, or on ramp, or Swan, or you know Nunchuck, or just all these different Bitcoin only companies. That's what we're trying to go for, because at least with us, we see the same thing you see. This is coming. It's too big to stop. Whether full adoption comes now or later, or governments want to try to mess it up, it doesn't matter. It's inevitable, in my opinion, and it's coming. But I would love to get your perspective. And before we run out of time here, I know I've taken up a lot of your time. As if for a new entrepreneur who's coming up, and or small business owner or whatever, and they're on the fence about Bitcoin, what would you say to them? It's got to be hard, because some of them don't have, maybe they don't have 5,000, 10,000 extra dollars right now to even put toward their treasury with Bitcoin. What would you say to like a new business owner coming up?
Well, I would encourage them to think about what makes something valuable. Why is something valuable? If you just break down the world in different brackets, like what comes to mind is Saylor's presentation from 2023 in Prague, where it was the first one to use slides.
Mm-hmm.
You essentially have so many things that you can save your surplus in. You can save it in cash. You can save it in real estate. You can save it in equities. You can save it in bonds, government or corporate debt. You can save it in commodities or collectibles. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's it. There's only so many things that you can buy. And so, going back to what you said about, you weren't particularly interested in economics, and neither was I, because it's nebulous. It doesn't make any fucking sense. It's like this algebraic
Yeah,
equation with nothing but variables. Like
yeah.
you can't put a number on what the inflation rate really is. CPI is the CPI, like it's a manipulated metric. You can't measure like how many things are being bought and sold globally. Like I don't know, you could say borderline infinite. Like and like the supply relative to the demand is going to
Mm-hmm.
depict what the price is on something, and then what are you measuring the value of that thing in. um so if you look at what makes something valuable, you also need to look at like, so that's going to be the five properties of money. I believe
Mm-hmm.
it's got to be durable, it's got to be divisible, it's got to be fungible, it's got to be portable, and it's got to be scarce.
Mm-hmm.
And so those things, those properties, like real estate fits those properties better, or has those, those properties are stronger within real estate than it is the dollar, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
But what's happening with real estate is the same thing that's happening with the Toyota pickup truck in your driveway. It's going
Right.
down in value. You just can't see it because you're measuring the value of the real estate and the truck with another variable, another moving unit. So what's happening is the real estate going up in value, or is the dollar going down in value? And in this particular case, the dollar is going down in value.
Yep.
Both things are actually liabilities. They're not assets. And so I think that basic understanding, and if you start to look at, there's only so many things that you can save your surplus in. Even though it seems like there's infinite things that you could buy in the world, there's really only so many categories of things that you can buy in the world. And so what are you going to do if you have a surplus? Even if it's $100 a month, like I know most, especially most Americans, can save a couple $100 a month. They're spending $9 on high fructose laden fucking frappuccinos at Starbucks. I promise you, if they were motivated to not fucking be poor and to have more economic optionality in the future, if that motivation was strong enough, they'd forego the high fructose corn syrup ice cream drink that's coffee flavored, right? And so if you look at it from that perspective, you can save your money. And what you're getting with Bitcoin is a perfected monetary instrument. It's not being debased. It can't be confiscated if you custody it properly. It's infinitely durable. It's just code. It's invisible. So it has no maintenance cost. And you can buy literally any amount of it. You don't have to have economic privilege that the elite class does to effectively hedge yourself against the debasement of the currency. So everyone knows that prices are going up in dollar terms, but I think what people fail to see, or at least your average everyday individual, is that prices are going down in Bitcoin terms. And so I have conversations with people who are like, oh yeah, Bidenomics, and oh, things are getting so expensive. And I'm just like, oh, really? They're getting cheaper for me. And so, well, what do you mean? Well, all my money's in Bitcoin. Every year I get more shit. Like, you know, like, what are you doing? And so, you know, we live in an energy in, energy out world too. We have to consume energy to exert energy, right? And so we're trying to figure out how to be the most energy efficient. And so as you produce a surplus, even if it's a small surplus, and I think most people honestly are so discouraged by the progressively harder lives that they're living, they kind of are giving up that. And we're in this like sedative hypnosis of some sort, generally from the music and the food and the line from the government and all the stuff. People kind of don't really care. They kind of given up in some sense. And so when you realize though that you can DCA into Bitcoin any amount, and that those earnings are going to actually be preserved in real terms, that we're in the midst of what I call the great demonetization, where Bitcoin is demonetizing the monetary premium and all of their asset classes globally. You have a tremendous opportunity in front of you. And so, I don't know, I guess I just kind of encourage people to like, just think about it a little bit. What makes things valuable? Like, why are people like, another one is, you know, I'm at dinner the other night and I'm down in El Salvador, and like someone there at this retreat is like, oh, so-and-so has so much money. I'm like, whoa. No. They have a lot of stuff. They don't have a lot of money. The person's worth however many billions of dollars. I assure you it's not sitting in a fucking savings account at JP Morgan Chase. They own a bunch of equities and companies, and they own a bunch of real estate. They don't have a lot of money. They have a lot of stuff. You know, Jeff Booth says, where you have abundance in money, you create scarcity and everything else. If the money is really abundant and the supply is progressively getting larger and larger and larger, then you need to get rid of the money and hold something that's more scarce than the money is, but is also desirable. And where you have scarcity in money, you create abundance in everything else. Because if the money is the hardest asset or monetary instrument in the marketplace, then the incentive is to hold just the money and buy only what you need. So it's going to incentivize prudence. It's going to decentivize waste. It just flips everything on its head. And so, yeah, I just really encourage people to think about why things are of value, what they're holding to save their economic energy in. Like, I just love how Sailor, you know, in the Sailor series, Breedlove asks him, like, what is money? And Sailor's like, oh, I had to really think about it. I think it's economic energy. Like, you're trading your life force by producing a good or a service, and you're getting some form of money in exchange. In this case, in the modern world, it's a shitty, centrally controlled, bleeding out currency. And
Yeah.
if you have any wherewithal whatsoever and you're making a surplus, you might not even know what you're doing. Hell, I started this business, or I'm a rapper and I made all this money and I had to go to a financial advisor who then took all of that currency and converted it into a bunch of stuff. So why are we saving all this stuff? Well, because the money is shitty. And so then you got to look at what makes the stuff valuable. And then if you look at what makes the stuff valuable and you're intellectually honest and you're halfway competent, then you'll realize that it's, you know, scarcity, it's liquidity. How liquid is this thing? How quickly can I sell? Is it portability? Like you own a bunch of buildings in LA and you know, that I don't know, they start to raise your property taxes. What are you going to do? You're going to have to sell the buildings only to a couple multi-billionaires that want to buy it. Like if you got Bitcoin, you just leave, you just take it with you.
Yes.
So yeah, that's kind of a thought dump there, but I would just encourage people to think about why they're doing what they're doing. You know, like stop for a second. It's famously said by Sailor, you work what, 60,000 hours of your life, like trying to earn. Well, maybe you should spend 100 figuring out what it is that you're earning. You know, you work for money, 60,000 hours. Maybe you should spend 100, maybe just 10. I don't know, 10 hours, just like thinking, what the fuck is money?
Yeah. I think you said
I think
you said at the conference, if you study Bitcoin, you buy it.
Totally, dude.
It's very simple.
Yes.
Well, Eric, it's been an absolute pleasure. Again, I probably said it to you before the call instead of in the beginning, but big fan for a while. Listened to a lot of your YouTube episodes, your other podcasts. I mean, a huge fan of yours and how you think about money, how you think about Bitcoin, how you think about the world, and just how you see things. And as a family guy myself, I definitely appreciate the fact that when you go on these trips, I see you posting pictures with your kids. I think it's very awesome. I try to bring my kids and
we go everywhere.
I try to make them a part of everything I do as well. And I'm trying to orange pill them early in life so that they see things better than maybe I did growing up. So thank you for taking the time out of your day. Thank you for being an inspiration for a lot of us in business and Bitcoin and family men. So thank you very much. And I hope to see you at a conference or a show at some point so I can shake your hand and say thank you.
Yes, man. Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate the compliment. That means a lot. And it's an honor having this conversation with you.
Definitely. All right. Thank you.
Yes.
Bye.